Attention passionate Cleveland, BROWNS. Latest news, something big is happening in the AFC North and it could change the game. We're talking about a direct impact on Cleveland Browns' path to another Super Bowl run, a power shift that could leave a division rival stumbling for years. We're bringing this to you firsthand. But before that, if you're a true Cleveland Browns fan, subscribe to the channel to strengthen this passion even more. Show that you're also part of this family. Let's help each other reach 1,000 subscribers. Share with your FRINDS and Cleveland, BROWNS. Let's get to the news now, folks. If you've been paying any attention to the NFL lately, you already know that the Cleveland Browns are in a very interesting phase. It's a time of transition, of rebuilding, but also of high expectations. We're talking about a team that's been knocking on the door for a playoff breakthrough for years. And this season might just be the one where everything clicks. But before we dive deep into the current state of the Browns, let's talk about a story that's been making waves, not necessarily for the right reasons. And it involves one of the most talked about young quarterbacks in the league, SHEDEUR Sanders. That name might ring a bell because he's the son of none other than DEION Sanders, a legend of the game, a Hall of Famer, and a guy whose personality and career have always been colorful, controversial at times, but undeniably influential. SHEDEUR Sanders, now stepping into the NFL spotlight, was projected to be a first-round pick in the 2025 draft. Everyone was talking about his talent, his arm strength, his football IQ. But as the draft approached, an unexpected slide began. Instead of hearing his name called early, SHEDEUR was picked in the 5th round. That's a fall, folks. From being a top-tier quarterback prospect to slipping into round 5. That's a story of hype, disappointment, and questions about whether he's truly NFL ready. And honestly, it became the talk of the draft day. Why did he fall? Many analysts pointed to concerns about his consistency, his decision-making under pressure, and perhaps some doubts about how his game would translate to the next level. Now, here's the thing, SHEDEUR is currently the 4th quarterback on Cleveland's roster. Not exactly what you'd call a guaranteed starter. The Browns, like many teams, are in a bit of a quarterback carousel right now, trying to find the right fit, the guy who can lead them deep into the playoffs. And SHEDEUR's goal, of course, is to climb that depth chart, to go from the bottom to the top, to prove that the hype and the draft fall were just a blip, and that he belongs among the league's best. But life off the field has thrown him a curveball recently, and it's not about football. On June 5th, SHEDEUR was caught speeding, going 91 miles per hour in a 65 mph zone. And if that wasn't enough, less than 2 weeks later, on June 17th, he was pulled over again for doing 101 mph in a 60 mph zone. Now, for any NFL player, especially a rookie trying to make his mark, these kinds of incidents are not just minor lapses in judgment. They send a message, whether intended or not, that there might be some maturity issues. And for Browns fans, who already have high hopes for this young talent, it raises questions. How will SHEDEUR handle the pressure? Will mistakes like these affect his development, or are they just youthful indiscretions? What really drew the attention, though, was SHEDEUR's response during a charity softball event hosted by Browns tight end David Njoku. When asked about the speeding tickets, SHEDEUR said, "I'm just a little boy, I made some wrong choices personally. I gotta own up to them. I made some not great choices. I learned from I learn. Now, I don't know about you, but that kind of response, especially coming from someone who's about to enter the most scrutinized league in the world, sounds a bit too casual. It's almost as if he's brushing off serious concerns with a cute, almost naive attitude. And that's where the criticism really starts to mount. The Browns, in typical corporate fashion, responded with a quick statement. "He is taking care of the tickets," said Browns spokesman Peter Jean-Baptiste. Now that's the kind of boilerplate reply you expect. He's addressing it, he's taking responsibility. But here's the problem, it's just 7 words. 7 words that, frankly, don't do justice to the seriousness of the situation. It feels like a canned response that glosses over the real issue, which is, let's be honest, about maturity, responsibility, and understanding the gravity of endangering others by driving at such high speeds. And that's where the complexity of this story lies. Because SHEDEUR's father, DEION Sanders, is a legendary figure who's always been in the spotlight, sometimes controversial, sometimes celebrated for his unfiltered honesty. DEION has often positioned himself as a guy who believes his kids are under attack, unfairly criticized, or persecuted because of their fame. And yes, SHEDEUR is 23 years old, not exactly a kid anymore, but still young enough to make mistakes. But the question is, how much of that narrative helps or hurts the situation? Because let's be honest, sometimes the image of a superstar's son can get a pass. He's just young, he's learning. But in the NFL, especially at a demanding franchise like Cleveland, that kind of attitude can be a double-edged sword. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the Cleveland Browns themselves, because this story about SHEDEUR is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. The Browns have been a team with a rich history, full of highs and lows. They're a franchise that has seen legendary players like Jim Brown, Paul Warfield, and later on, players like Bernie Kosar and Joe Thomas, but also periods of struggle, of rebuilding, of trying to find stability at quarterback. Since returning to the league in 1999, the Browns have been desperate for a franchise quarterback who can lead them to consistent playoff success. And in recent years, they've been close, very close to breaking through. They've invested heavily in the roster, bringing in new talent, both on defense and offense, and they've been building a culture of resilience and grit. This season, expectations are high. The Browns have one of the most talented rosters in the AFC North, arguably the most competitive division in the league. They've got a solid defense led by Myles Garrett, one of the best pass rushers in the league, and a secondary that's capable of shutting down some of the best receivers in the league. Offensively, they've added some key pieces, including a revamped offensive line and a young, dynamic group of skill position players. The question mark, as always, is the quarterback position. Deshaun Watson, the veteran who was acquired to bring stability, has shown flashes of brilliance but also inconsistency. If SHEDEUR Sanders manages to develop and seize opportunities, he could be the guy to push Watson and elevate the offense to new heights. But at the same time, the Browns are not just looking for talent. They want leadership, maturity, guys who understand the importance of representing the franchise with dignity and responsibility. That's why incidents like speeding tickets might seem minor on paper, but in the NFL, they send ripples through the locker room and the fan base. Fans are hungry for a team that embodies resilience and professionalism. They want to believe in their young stars, but they also want to see maturity and growth off the field as well as on it. Looking at SHEDEUR's situation, it's a reminder that NFL careers are often defined not just by what happens on Sundays, but also by how players handle themselves off the field. The league has become increasingly vigilant about players' conduct, both legally and socially. A young quarterback with a strong arm and promising talent can still have his career derailed by poor decisions, especially if those decisions are repeated or become public spectacle. That's why Browns management and coaching staff will be watching SHEDEUR closely, hoping that he learns from these mistakes, matures, and eventually earns his spot as a true leader in Cleveland. In terms of the bigger picture, this story about SHEDEUR Sanders highlights how fragile a young player's reputation can be in today's social media age. Every comment, every mistake, every response is amplified. The Browns are in a position where they want to develop talent, but they also need to build a culture of accountability. And that's why the focus is so intense on how players behave, both on and off the field. It's a balancing act nurturing raw talent while instilling discipline and responsibility. Now, bringing the focus back to the Browns' current season, the team's outlook is optimistic but cautious. They've got the talent. The coaching staff led by Kevin Stefanski is known for developing quarterbacks and creating a disciplined, smart offense. The defense, already mentioned, is among the league's best, and the special teams are solid. The AFC North is brutal, with teams like the Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers, and Cincinnati Bengals all vying for supremacy, but Cleveland's roster depth and coaching ingenuity make them serious contenders. If everything clicks, if Deshaun Watson finds his rhythm and young players like SHEDEUR can step up when called upon, the Browns could be dark horses in the AFC playoff race. However, it's not just about talent. The mental toughness, discipline, and leadership are what separate the good teams from the great ones. That's why stories like these, about mistakes, responses, and growth, are so critical. They serve as a test for young players like SHEDEUR, a chance to show whether they can handle the pressures of the league and mature into the franchise leaders of tomorrow. Browns fans are hopeful, but they're also realistic. They know that every player, especially young ones, has to earn their respect on and off the field. Looking ahead, the Browns have a lot to prove this season. They have the talent to make a deep playoff run, but execution, discipline, and leadership will be the key factors. The NFL season is a long journey, filled with highs and lows, tough matchups, and moments that define careers. SHEDEUR Sanders' off-season incidents are a reminder that even in a sport as physically demanding as football, the mental and emotional maturity of players can be just as important. Cleveland fans are eager to see how their young quarterback prospects develop, both in their skills and in their character. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the Browns' current landscape, let's keep an eye on how this team evolves over the next few months. The AFC North is shaping up to be one of the most exciting divisions in recent memory, with every team hungry for success. Cleveland has the pieces, the coaching, and the fan base that creates an electric atmosphere every game day. The question remains, can they put everything together and make a real push toward the postseason? And what role will young players like SHEDEUR Sanders play in that journey? Only time will tell, but one thing is for sure, Browns fans, this season promises to be thrilling, full of drama, growth, and hopefully, a lot of winning. Pause here just for a second. If you want the YouTube algorithm to keep recommending the latest Cleveland Browns news to you, it's super important that you leave a like on this video. Go ahead, it's quick and it makes a big difference. Thank you. Now let us continue with the big reveal. Now before we finish, I want to emphasize that this whole story about SHEDEUR Sanders is just one small piece of a much larger puzzle for the Cleveland Browns. This franchise has a long, storied history, filled with legendary moments and some tough periods. They've always been a team that's capable of greatness, but consistency has eluded them at times. The arrival of new talent, the development of young stars, and the leadership of experienced veterans are all part of the process to bring the Browns back to the top of the AFC, and ultimately, to contend for that elusive Super Bowl title. The 2023 season was a roller coaster for Cleveland fans. They saw flashes of brilliance from their defense, a few promising moments from their offense, and a lot of close games that could have gone either way. The coaching staff, led by Kevin Stefanski, proved that they can adapt, that they know how to get the most out of their players, even in tough circumstances. But what's really exciting is the potential of the young core, including players like Garrett, the defensive star, and the emerging offensive weapons. Now, with the addition of young talents like SHEDEUR Sanders, even if he's still trying to find his footing, the future looks bright. Of course, patience is key. Browns fans have been through a lot over the years. The heartbreak of missed opportunities, the frustration of inconsistent quarterback play, and the hope that someday the team will finally reach the promised land. The recent incidents involving SHEDEUR, while not ideal, are a reminder that every player's journey involves setbacks and learning moments. The true test is how they respond, how they grow, and whether they can channel their potential into consistent excellence. Looking forward, the Browns have a schedule that's filled with tough opponents, divisional battles, and playoff-caliber teams. They'll need to be at their best every week, both physically and mentally. The AFC North is no joke. The Ravens, with their innovative offense, the Steelers with their tough, disciplined defense, and the Bengals with their high-powered passing game. Cleveland will have to bring their A-game, and that includes managing off-field distractions and keeping their young stars focused. In terms of playoff aspirations, the Browns are in a good position. They have a solid foundation on defense, a promising offensive line, and enough talent to compete with anyone. The key will be consistency, avoiding costly mistakes, and developing leadership in the locker room. Young players like SHEDEUR Sanders, even with their flaws, are part of that equation. They represent hope, potential, and the future of the franchise. But they also serve as a reminder that growth takes time, and responsibility is part of that process. So Browns fans, as we look ahead to what promises to be an exciting season, let's remember that every story, every game, and every player is part of a larger narrative. Cleveland is a franchise that's been hungry for success for decades. They've faced setbacks, but they've also had moments of glory that keep the fan base dreaming. This year might be the year they finally break through, and with the young core growing and maturing, it feels like they're on the cusp of something special. And of course, we'll be here every step of the way to bring you all the latest updates, analysis, and behind-the-scenes stories. And now, Cleveland Browns fans, I want to hear from you. What's your take on the SHEDEUR Sanders situation? Do you think these off-field incidents will impact his future in Cleveland? Are Are you optimistic about this season, or do you think there are still some hurdles to overcome? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion matters so much to us and to the Cleveland Browns. And don't forget, I'll be back soon with more updates, so stay tuned for the latest Cleveland Browns news. This team is always evolving, always surprising, and I can't wait to see what they do next. Thanks for sticking around, Browns fans. This season is shaping up to be one for the history books.